The state of California has sued U.S. President Donald Trump over what it called an illegal, unwarranted, and unauthorized deployment of National Guard to Los Angeles. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to hold a security meeting on Iran's nuclear program, including far-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich.
NATO chief Mark Rutte has called for a 400% increase in air and missile defense in response to mounting global threats.
Ukraine and Russia have begun a new prisoner exchange after a second round of direct talks in Istanbul.
The state of California has filed a lawsuit against U.S. President Donald Trump over what it called an illegal deployment of U.S. National Guard. California officials, including Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom, filed the legal proceedings on Monday in an effort to force the Trump administration to reverse action. Earlier, Trump authorized the deployment of 2,000 National Guard members to help address the ongoing anti-Trump immigration policy protests in Los Angeles. Typically, U.S. presidents only deploy National Guards at the request of a state governor. But Trump invoked a special clause that bypasses Newsom, who did not request nor approve of this deployment.
We have an incompetent governor, so I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening, and they now admit it was a disaster.
Additionally, Trump also deployed 700 Marines to help the National Guard stabilize the situation. Newsom has displayed staunch criticism of Trump, saying his actions amount to a takeover and violation of state sovereignty, arguing that it sets a dangerous precedent. Trump had also earlier on Monday suggested that his government should arrest Newsom for resisting federal efforts. Newsom responded to the comment saying it was a sad day for the country and warned of Trump's growing authoritarianism. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to hold a security meeting on Iran. It comes after his conversation with U.S. President Donald Trump on the matter, which Israeli media reported to have lasted around 40 minutes. Trump was asked about the call with the Israeli premier but did not offer much detail on the matters discussed, instead insisting that it went very well and smooth. The meeting will include Defense Minister Israel Katz, Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, and Shas Party Chairman Aryeh Deri. Also taking part in the meeting are far-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who run the National Security and Finance Ministries. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are typically not included in such high-level conferences. The meeting comes as Tehran is expected to respond to a U.S. proposal over its nuclear program. Washington has reportedly proposed to allow Iran to continue enriching uranium within their nation at low levels and for a limited time period. Tehran is expected to reject this proposal, with rumors circulating that Iranian officials will not accept a deal which dictates permissions on their own sovereign soil. A convoy of buses and private cars departed from Tunisia's capital on Monday headed to Gaza. The initiative aims to shed light on Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid to the enclave, as Israeli authorities stopped a high-profile flotilla carrying aid from landing there. The overland effort, organized independently but moved up to coincide with the flotilla, is made up of activists, lawyers, and medical professionals from North Africa. The convoy is set to traverse Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt before reaching Gaza through the border crossing in Rafah. The Rafah border crossing has remained largely closed since the Israeli military took control of the Gaza side in May of last year. Civil society groups behind the initiative say their aim is to demand the immediate lifting of the unjust siege on the territory. They stress that Arab governments aren't doing enough to end the 20-month-long war between Israel and Hamas. After an almost 3-month blockade of Gaza aimed at pressuring Hamas, Israel started allowing in some basic and limited amounts of aid last month.
NATO chief Mark Rutte has called for a quantum leap in defense spending in response to mounting global threats, particularly from Russia. Speaking at Chatham House after meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he said that a 400% increase in air and missile defense is needed to counter these threats. Starmer has pledged to increase British defence spending to 2.5% of gross domestic product by 2027 and to 3% by 2034.
Russia could be ready to use military force against NATO within 5 years. 5 years. Let's not kid ourselves. We are all on the eastern flank now. The new generation of Russian missiles travel at many times the speed of sound. The distance between European capitals is only a matter of minutes. There is no longer east or west. There is just NATO.
Rutte has proposed a target of 3.5% of economic output on military spending and another 1.5% on defence-related expenditures such as roads, bridges, airfields and seaports. Most NATO members have already pledged a substantial increase in military spending, and Rutte said he is confident the alliance will agree to the 5% target at its summit in The Hague in 2 weeks.
Ukraine and Russia have started a new prisoner exchange following an agreement reached at the second round of direct talks in Istanbul last Monday. Ukrainians are coming home from Russian captivity, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a statement. Kiev and Moscow agreed that the exchange would include young soldiers under 25 years old and those severely ill. Russia's defense ministry confirmed the return of the first group of Russian POWs on Monday. Among those returning to Ukraine are the defenders of Mariupol, who have spent over 3 years in Russian captivity. Both sides have also agreed to exchange the bodies of fallen soldiers. Kyiv says it has brought back over 5,000 prisoners of war in a series of exchanges since March, and that it continues to offer Russia an all-for-all swap.
A referendum in Italy on easing access to citizenship and boosting worker protection failed due to low turnout. To be valid, the vote required participation from at least 50% plus one of eligible voters. However, Italian authorities said slightly less than 30% of eligible voters had cast their ballots at the end of 2 days of voting. One ballot question asked voters whether the residency requirement for Italian citizenship should be cut from 10 to 5 years. The remaining 4 questions addressed recent reforms on labour rights and protections. The proposals came from Italy's unions and left-wing opposition parties. But the ruling coalition opposed the measures, with some politicians urging voters to stay away and sink the turnout below the quorum threshold. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni went to the polling station but deliberately left without voting. Cleanup began after dozens of residents in the Swiss canton of Valais were evacuated following a mudslide. Caused by heavy rainfall, the mudslide tore away an emergency bridge in the area, meaning a pedestrian and cycle path is the only thing linking 2 rural villages.
Déjà, on est bloqué parce qu'on ne peut plus accéder aux autres villages et il y a les gens qui descendent du bus qui veulent monter jusqu'à Lourtier, ils ont 40-45 minutes de marche. Un peu compliqué.
On est venu voir déjà le chantier en cours, voir à quoi ça ressemble de près, parce que hier on était en face et on a vu des rochers descendre du sommet. Et puis,
The debris flooding the area since last week's storm carries wood, mud and large stones. Locals will be relocated elsewhere for an indefinite period, according to local officials.
This year, arrivals to Greece by air will be up by roughly 7%. However, the increase will mainly concern Athens and Thessaloniki. Other Greek islands, particularly in the Aegean, seem to have reached their limits on how many visitors they can accommodate. This is fueling renewed discussions on whether restrictions should be placed on the creation of new accommodation in the most popular destinations.
Θεωρώ λοιπόν ότι πρέπει να μπει ένα φραγμό στην ανάπτυξη των κλινών κάθε επίπεδου ξενοδοχείας, είτε Airbnb είτε πεντάστερο. Επειδή και το ειδικό πολεοδομικό βρίσκεται σε εξέλιξη, εμείς ζητούμε να μην υπάρχουν ζώνες τουριστικής ανάπτυξης.
Μετά τη συνεχή άνοδο των τελευταίων 3 ετών, ο αριθμός των τουριστών το 2025 στα ελληνικά νησιά αναμένεται να παραμείνει στα ίδια επίπεδα με πέρυσι. Η τουριστική βιομηχανία παραδέχεται ότι προκειμένου να αυξηθεί ο αριθμός των τουριστών, πρέπει πρώτα να υλοποιηθούν κρίσιμες υποδομές.
Ίδρυυση, αποχέτευση, κυκλοφοριακό, το οποίο είναι ένα μεγάλο πρόβλημα στο νησί, η κατάσταση των δρόμων και η κίνηση που αντιμετωπίζουν, τα πάρκινγκ που δεν υπάρχουν. Κάποιοι από αυτά έχουν εύκολες λύσεις που συζητιούνται και εμείς τις προτείνουμε μαζί με την τοπική αυτοδιοίκηση. Κάποιες θέλουν χρόνο. Οτιδήποτε όμως κάνει σε δημόσια διοίκηση υποδομές, γνωρίζουμε ότι δεν είναι μια απόφαση που την παίρνει σήμερα και ξεκινάει αύριο.
Greek hoteliers argue that the term over-tourism is being used to cover up chronic pathologies of the state, which has failed to ensure that the Greek islands have the necessary infrastructure to support visitors.
Η Σαντορίνη και η Μύκονο δεν έχει αυτόν τον κωδικό, δεν έχει καμία επένδυση σε υποδομή. Δεν μπορούμε να μιλάμε για στρατηγικό σχεδιασμό και κορονίδες του ελληνικού τουρισμού και να μην έχουν τις υποχρεωτικές υποδομές. Ένα νέο λιμάνι είναι υποχρεωτική υποδομή και δεν υπάρχει περιθώριο σκέψης γι' αυτό.
Hoteliers have asked that the 500 million euros per year in fees paid by visitors be allocated to projects that allow quality and sustainable tourism.